Why I write the things I do. You should read the post previous to this to know what the rant is all about. I've been accused recently and by someone who should know better of writing to market. This is not true, though it might not be immediately obvious. What I choose to write, what I have to say in each short story or novel I want to write. Often desperately enough to do it, often for the drawer. And hell, if I wrote to market, I'd write a lot more thrillers, romances and women in peril. With one exception, my one write-for-hire book. I write a story when it chases me down, pins me to the desk and makes me type. I write it because I must. I feel exactly the same way about the politically corrap pap the kids get assigned in school, and half of what's being cranked out by publishing houses, too. It's not, my friends, that I disagree with their contentions. I do indeed qualify a lot of them, like the whole men versus women thing, and others are so historical it's not even funny, but in general, it's that most of them are only repeating received wisdom, and furthermore, received wisdom that, disagree with it or not, no one will oppose. Just like good always wins and evil always loses is a load of patooey in real life. But it is the way we all wish it were. And at the same time it is a message repeated from all the churches and institutions catering to the young, since there have been churches and institutions. In the same way that 10,000th empowered woman defeats evil male saga might possibly contribute to the self-esteem of some severely battered woman, who somehow managed to avoid all other identical tomes, rolling off the presses for the last 20 years at least. For me they are just a oh heck, yeah. Go sister. Yawn as I toss the book aside. This should not be interpreted to mean that all empowered women characters are a bad thing. Or that you can't have evil males. In my upcoming Dark Ship Thieves I have both. In spades. I mean a black and white dichotomy of women good because they're women, men bad because they're men. And don't even get me started on the men as supervillain school of saying. That's where men are amazing beings who have kept all women enslaved for 6,000 years, change history, suppress thought and in their spare time display amazing mind control powers. It was date rape. He talked me into having sex, officer. What could a poor woman do against his male mind rays? Again, this can be taken to disparage all cases of date rape, but that's a rant for another time. Most of them, these days, don't even get me mad enough to want to write the exact opposite. It's just all too much of a muchness. So, no, my books don't have an obvious message. They have messages, of course. Usually several. All of which fits into an overarching view of the world. Mine. I'm not preaching at people. There are things I just have to say, and that I think are more likely to make an impact if you absorb them subconsciously through fiction. Things like yes, you're oppressed. That doesn't give you an excuse not to try. Things like you'll be much happier if you love others as well as yourself. And I'm sure quite a few more, if you look carefully. All that said, and granted I've written things for the drawer which will not see the light of day till I'm dead, or the kids put me in a mental institution and get custody of my work, whichever comes first, writing is essentially communication. You write to be read. Otherwise you're just murdering a bunch of innocent pixels, and if you print a dirty ink paper on one side. So when I write I try to maximize the chances that the books or stories will be accepted. Much of this at this point takes place at a level I'm not even aware of. Also, though it might not look like it, a lot of my writing planning is subconscious in the real sense. Take Draw 1 in the dark advisable, really. There will be a new cover for the paperback, and that hardcover will be a collectible. Trust me. The characters, both main characters and Raphael, came to me fully formed. I have clue zero why Tom is short. I just know I can't change it. I have no idea why Kiri is Kiri of all things. Not only does it mean Lord in Greek apparently, but Kiri Grace is the name of my friend Alison's daughter, which I did not want to steal. The poor girl will grow up expecting to change into a panther. However, when I first vividly saw her in my mind I kept thinking that KR was in there somewhere and I sound too. I tried Chris and Carissa and you don't want to know. Finally it was born upon me her name was Kiri. And from that moment on, I knew her. Beyond characters, I often lack control over voice. Each of my novels has a voice it wants to be told in. Books in the same series have a slightly different voice. Until I find the voice I can't write the book. This is responsible for 90% of my late deliveries. Health is responsible for the rest. I'll find myself cleaning toilets, raking the yard and or petting cats, while I look for the voice. Once it pops in my head, once the story starts speaking in its own voice, I'm home free, pretty much. Given that, there are things I can control. Above all, there are things I should control. And those involve removing as many obstacles between story and reader as possible. This is why I don't write stories set in Portugal. Without going into the other instances of it, let me point to you what Portugal conveys to the average American. The first, and because of previous conditioning, is oppressed. If I'm not writing a story of someone, usually the US, for these stories oppressing Portugal, then I will have to consider very carefully whether to set it there. For those of you confused by this, every American has been conditioned by previous books to expect a book set in a small country to be a book of US oppression. The editor who reads the book will expect it too. If it's not, I'll get a rejection telling me I dance around the point, or that they don't understand what I'm getting at, or second, Latin country, and by this I mean that a lot of Americans, those not in the northeast of the US at least, will assume Portugal is in South America, or that Portuguese speak Spanish, or that Portuguese are Hispanics. This means that a book set in Portugal will need to be about Latin culture. It will almost for sure have to feature a woman overcoming patriarchal society, or perhaps a book about the beauties of the Spanish language. I simply haven't felt like writing the type of book that would require this. Patriarchal society can be as well served by setting book in Victorian England. And, oh, by the way, if I ever feel like writing a book about the beauties of the Spanish language, I'll tell you. Don't wait with sandwiches by the phone. And here I pause to inform all those intending to deplore American ignorance to take a chill pill. Why should America know about Portugal? Oh, the discoveries, you say. Yes, they should. And the way the discoveries are taught in American schools is laughable, giving most of the credit to England. That said, it's still how it's taught, and I can't change it. As for the rest, how much do my Portuguese readers know of small countries with which we haven't had a war in forever? If I say Outer Slovenia without looking up in Google, do you know if it exists? And where would you place it mentally? Requiring Americans to know geography impeccably is stupid. It's the corollary of men as supervillains. As a proud American, I'll admit to many virtues. But contrary to what you might expect, we're not all assigned eidetic memories at birth or naturalization. Third, what do you mean, they're not just like us? The assumption in the US and in the rest of the world, though Europeans travel more to other cultures by virtue of living in a geographical space where you can swing a cat without hitting some poor peasant's head in Outer Slovenia. What Europeans don't know about America and the American mind and way of life, Odo, could fill several books. Any book set in Portugal is immediately rowing against the current to get into an editor's accept pile. This is true of any book in an unusual location. You can choose to beg exceptions in your characters' lives to make them almost American to stay on the surface, so that the true differences don't appear, both of which negate the point of setting it in another country, or you're going to have to explain every single thing, every step of the way. And if you don't, you risk giving the wrong impression of how you feel about some of these differences too. One of my early stories set in Portugal got me rejection, accusing me of being a xenophobic American who'd never been out of the country. This was based on one paragraph describing pastries kept not under refrigeration, but in glass domes on the countertop, in a deli in Portugal, which was normal in the early 80s. Though probably not now. It's the small things, too. I am sometimes still tripped up by this, as my own mind is still set for what do you mean they're not like us? And my childhood and early adulthood was spent in Portugal. At a workshop I almost came to cuffs with other writers over a scene in which someone makes a big bonfire with the photographs and letters of someone who just died. But why would anyone burn antique stuff was their thing. And they couldn't believe anyone did it without a special reason. The special reason is, of course, that in Portugal, if you don't do that to the vast majority of such inheritances, they'd be wading through old letters and papers, having had those since at least Roman colonization onwards. Because of all of those, if you set a novel in Portugal, particularly if you grew up there and know the real country, not the image in people's minds, you're going to have a hard time selling it. Unless you're working on one of the themes above and intend to do the work necessary to highlight in all the odd details without slowing the narrative down. To me, what this means is that half of my Portuguese short stories never sell. The other half take a long time to sell. And most of them I have to distort in some way to make them acceptable. The game is not worth the candle. I can write the same story and set it in a time with the same characteristics, and which American editors and readers are familiar with the history of the English-speaking world, provides a lot of places and situations, and avoid the hassle. This doesn't mean I won't ever write a novel set in Portugal, just that I have yet to find a compelling reason to do so. And there are other reasons not to. Those, I'll deal with in the next few days. And now, back to the real work. Sarah, I am required here by Miranda, who is glaring at me, to say that the cat swung is entirely metaphorical, and that anyone attempting to swing an actual animal will have to deal with Miranda Aka, cat princess of infinite power. Cats should be carried, cuddled and petted, not swung. Or she will pee on your books. If you like this content and want to support this channel, the blog, and Sarah's continued writing, please like and subscribe. If you really enjoy the content, please come and join the fun at accordingtohoyt.com.